Most fans remember the Andy Griffith Show as a flawless slice of small-town charm. Mayberry felt so real that viewers swore they could walk down Main Street and bump into Andy or Barney. But even in this near-perfect world, little mistakes slipped through the cracks. And here's the fun part: they've been hiding in plain sight for decades. From wardrobe slip-ups to background goofs you were never supposed to notice. These tiny errors remind us that even television magic has its rough edges. Did you ever catch a character driving a car that didn't even exist in the 1960s? Or a scene where Mayberry suddenly betrays its Hollywood set roots today? We're uncovering 7 of the most surprising mistakes that made it into the show. And trust me, once you see them, you'll never watch Mayberry the same way again. Mistake number 1. The changing jail cell keys. If you watched the Andy Griffith Show long enough, you probably noticed something odd about Mayberry's little jailhouse. Sheriff Taylor and Deputy Barney Fife were forever locking up moonshiners, petty thieves, and the occasional town drunk. The cells looked sturdy enough: thick bars, heavy doors, and of course, a big ring of keys that always hung right by Andy's desk. But here's where the mistake comes in: those keys had a strange habit of moving. In some episodes, you'll see them dangling neatly on the wall. In others, they're suddenly on the desk. And sometimes, believe it or not, the prisoners could actually reach them through the bars. Fans have joked for years that Otis, the lovable town drunk, didn't need to wait for Andy or Barney to let him out. All he had to do was grab the keys himself and stroll right back home. In fact, there are moments where you can clearly see actors pretending not to notice the obvious prop blunder, keeping the comedy rolling instead of stopping for a retake. It's one of those classic oops moments in television, a tiny detail the crew probably thought no one would spot. But sharp-eyed fans sure did. And once you've seen it, you'll never watch those jailhouse scenes the same way again. Mistake number 2. The magical disappearing. Barney Fife's hat was practically part of his character, always just a little crooked, never quite as crisp as he thought it looked. But eagle-eyed fans started spotting something strange. Barney's hat sometimes had a mind of its own. In one scene, he'd walk into the courthouse proudly tipping it off to Andy. Cut to the very next shot, and poof, it was gone. No rack, no hand gesture, nothing. Then, seconds later, the hat would magically reappear, perfectly perched on his head again. This wasn't a one-time blooper either. Throughout the series, little continuity slips with hats and uniforms popped up again and again. Sometimes Andy was the culprit, walking through Mayberry's streets bareheaded, only to suddenly sport his sheriff's cap mid-conversation. It's the kind of editing mistake that most audiences in the 1960s never caught. After all, televisions were smaller, picture quality was fuzzier, and people were more wrapped up in the story than in background details. Today, with crisp remasters and big flat-screen TVs, these tiny flubs are impossible to ignore. Fans often freeze frame and laugh about it online, turning Barney's vanishing hat into one of Mayberry's most famous running gags. It's proof that even the most beloved shows weren't immune to the occasional slip in continuity. And somehow, those little mistakes only make us love the characters more. Mistake number 3. The time-traveling automobiles. Mayberry was supposed to be a sleepy little town, frozen in its own timeless rhythm. But if you look closely, some of the cars driving through town seem a little too modern. In several episodes, you can spot shiny automobiles from the mid to late 60s cruising past the courthouse, even though the show was often written as if Mayberry lived in a world untouched by the changing decade. One minute Andy is leaning on his vintage Ford squad car, chatting with Barney, and the next, a slick new model zips by in the background that simply didn't exist when the early episodes were supposed to take place. This continuity hiccup was mostly a result of filming on location in Los Angeles, where traffic and parked cars couldn't always be controlled. The producers probably hoped no one would notice, or that audiences would forgive the occasional time-traveling vehicle. back then. Most folks were watching on black and white TVs with rabbit ears blink once, and you'd miss it entirely. But for today's fans, rewatching in high definition, these cars stick out like sore thumbs. They're like little Easter eggs that accidentally reveal the real world outside of Mayberry's carefully crafted bubble, instead of breaking the charm. Though, these automobile anachronisms add another layer of fun. They remind us that behind the illusion of small-town life was a bustling Hollywood set, where reality and fiction sometimes collided on screen. Mistake number 4. The wandering Mayberry backdrop. One of the things that made the Andy Griffith Show so charming was how real Mayberry felt. Fans could picture themselves walking past Floyd's barbershop or sitting on the bench outside the courthouse. But sharp-eyed viewers eventually spotted something unusual. The town itself sometimes shifted. In certain episodes, the same storefronts mysteriously swapped positions. One week, the post office was down the street. The next, it seemed to move right next to the barbershop. Even the courthouse windows occasionally changed shape or size between scenes. This wasn't some magical trick of Mayberry's small-town architecture. It was Hollywood stagecraft. Much of Mayberry was built on a backlot at Desilu Studios, and those sets were constantly redressed to fit whatever scene the producers needed. Move a sign here, repaint a storefront there, and suddenly you had new parts of town without building anything from scratch. The only problem, continuity sometimes went right out the window. For audiences in the 1960s, this sleight of hand worked just fine. But today, with binge-watching and freeze-frame scrutiny, the wandering backdrop has become one of the most talked-about goofs. Instead of spoiling the magic, though, fans often laugh and say it just proves Mayberry had a life of its own, forever shifting, forever charming. Mistake number 5. The ever-changing badge numbers. If there's one thing a sheriff and his deputy should have, it's consistency in their uniforms. Yet in the Andy Griffith Show, fans with sharp eyes noticed something off about those shiny badges Andy and Barney wore. The numbers engraved on them. They didn't always match. In some episodes, Andy's badge displayed one number, while in others, it mysteriously switched to another. Even Barney's badge seemed to have an identity crisis, flashing different digits depending on the day. For a show so focused on the charm of law and order in a small town, it's a surprisingly funny slip-up. Most likely, the costume department had several prop badges floating around the set and simply handed whichever one was closest to the actors. Nobody back then expected viewers to track such a small detail, remember. Reruns weren't a thing yet, and certainly no one imagined fans would one day be pausing in HD to zoom in on badge numbers. Today, though, the inconsistency has become a favorite Easter egg for fans rewatching the series. It doesn't take away from Andy's calm authority or Barney's lovable bumbling. It just adds another layer of fun trivia to spot. And for those who enjoy pointing out bloopers, the ever-changing badge numbers are a reminder that even Mayberry's finest weren't perfect when it came to continuity. Mistake number 6. The mysterious microphones. For a series set in a quiet North Carolina town, the Andy Griffith Show occasionally gave viewers an accidental peek behind the curtain. In several episodes, if you look closely at the top of the screen, you'll notice something that definitely doesn't belong in Mayberry, a microphone dipping down into the shot. These boom mics, meant to capture every line of Andy's calm drawl or Barney's frantic chatter, sometimes strayed a little too far. The result, a fuzzy black object hanging awkwardly above the characters, before quickly retreating out of view. To 1960s audiences, these slip-ups probably went unnoticed. Small televisions and low picture quality hid a lot of flaws, but modern fans, rewatching on crisp remasters, can't help but chuckle at the sight of a microphone hovering like a UFO over Mayberry. It's one of those mistakes that instantly reminds you as real as Mayberry feels. It was still a Hollywood set with cameras, crews, and plenty of technical hiccups. Rather than ruining the illusion, these moments add charm. They show how the magic of television was crafted in an era before digital editing or computer fixes. Every shot had to be timed just right, and sometimes it wasn't. For fans today, spotting a rogue microphone is like sharing an inside joke with the crew, proof that even in a near-perfect show, little bloopers slipped through. Mistake number 7. The disappearing family members. One of the quirkiest mistakes in the Andy Griffith Show doesn't involve props or sets. It's the characters themselves. Sharp-eyed fans noticed that certain family members seemed to vanish from Mayberry without so much as a goodbye. Andy's cousin or an occasional relative might appear in one episode, only to be written out completely and never mentioned again. Even Opie's friends sometimes shared lines of dialogue one week and then disappeared into thin air the next. The most famous example is Andy's own extended family. In early episodes, references were made to relatives who later seemed to cease existing in Mayberry's world. Continuity wasn't always a top priority for sitcom writers in the 1960s, and scripts were often designed as standalone stories. The writers probably assumed no one would keep track. After all, audiences back then couldn't rewind or rewatch episodes at will once it aired. It was gone. But modern viewers, armed with streaming services and sharp memories, have pieced together these inconsistencies. They laugh at how entire characters could vanish without explanation, as if Mayberry itself quietly decided to edit its population. Instead of seeing it as sloppy writing, fans today often treat these disappearances as part of the show's quirky charm. It adds a bit of mystery. Who knows where those missing relatives went? Maybe they just moved out of town. Or maybe Mayberry always had a way of keeping things simple. Looking back, the mistakes we've explored don't really weaken the Andy Griffith Show, if anything. They make it more endearing. Mayberry was never meant to be flawless. It was meant to feel real. And just like real life, little imperfections slipped through, from wandering backdrops to vanishing hats. These bloopers remind us that behind the laughter and heartwarming lessons were actors, stagehands, and writers doing their best to create television magic on a tight schedule. For fans, spotting these slip-ups has become almost a game, a way to rewatch the series with fresh eyes. It's proof that no matter how many times you've seen Andy calm a heated argument, or Barney fumble with his one bullet, there's always something new to notice. And now, we'd love to hear from you. Which mistakes surprised you the most? Have you ever caught a blooper that we didn't mention here? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might even inspire a future video. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Show 1960s, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into classic TV. Every click helps us keep Mayberry's charm alive for generations to come. After all, these golden moments are worth preserving, and with your help, they always will be.